Don't ask what the world needs. Ask what makes you come alive and go do it. Because what the world needs is people who have come alive, said author Howard Thurman. Welcome to the second season of the Vulnerable Power Show. Heart-to-heart, unscripted dialogues with world leaders who are shining examples of the unfolding leadership ascension. Hear from these creative leaders and visionary entrepreneurs who have traversed deep leadership transformations and inner alchemy, actualizing their vision for a better world. We share raw insights and practical tips so you too can transform painful experiences and old energies as fuel for your leadership growth and collective good. Join us and listen in so we can all bring hope, inspire transformation, uplift the world, and show what is possible through heart-centered, vulnerable leadership. As Margaret Mead, anthropologist, once said, "Never believe that a few caring people can't change the world. For indeed, that's all who ever have." Greetings, everybody. Greetings and welcome back. Welcome back to another episode of the Vulnerable Power Show. What's the Vulnerable Power Show? If you're new here, well, first of all, welcome. This is an immersive and raw experience where we sit and talk with world leaders that are embodying this unfolding paradigm of leadership ascension, where we share, wherever you're at on your leadership journey, practical insights and wisdom for you to be inspired, encouraged, and empowered. And we're all about raw, deep dives from the heart. Today, as every day that we have this episode, I'd like to introduce the guest. This particular soul sister who's here to share her transformative journey, which is pretty remarkable. I met through the Insight Timer app, where we're both teachers, and I've had the privilege of being able to kind of step more into my calling. And when we met, I said, you know what? There's a resonance, and I feel like I know you. Now, the rest is not history, it's her story. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce my guest today, a dear soul friend and companion, Birgit, not Birgit, as I have said, and she's been kind enough not to correct me the last few months of knowing one another. Birgit Penzenstadler joining us today. How are you, B?
Thank you. I am very well. How are you doing?
I'm feeling blessed. And I had a sense you were going to come on the show, and I'm glad that we were feeling inspired. And even before we hit record, much like another German soul sister from season 1, Tanya, when she came on the first time, before we even hit record the first time, she said, I got to download. And I said, this is like deja vu, because then B, who's also from Germany, said, we're going to do another one after this. I said, great. So this is going to be apparently part 1 of 2. So stay tuned. Without further ado, tell us, B, why you do what you do. We're going to get to, because it's fabulous, as I've learned, meeting you through breathwork and what you call bliss work, so to speak, and then wanting to do it in the tech space, being in academia, all of this yummy stuff that you all are going to hear, and bringing woo-woo, as I call it, to the tech space. And so start with, whoa, where were you and how did this come about in terms of your transformational journey, your metamorphosis, this inner alchemy, so to speak?
All right. I was in between a very creative space and a very techie structured space for most of my life, I would say. So during high school times, it was more the creative space. And then I was going to study communication, arts design. I didn't get into the art school. So I had to figure out within just a few weeks to go what I wanted to study instead. I went online and looked around and I found this little subject called media and design. Sounded great. Desktop publishing, web design, art history, I'm all in. And then I read the fine print, which says, this is a minor subject, major subject required computer science. Computer what? Really? Seriously? And I ventured into that field for, well, to try it out. And then I got so busy succeeding in the thing, because that's what you're supposed to do as a German. You pick a thing, you stick with it. We are a little bit stubborn that way. And instead of rethinking whether it was the right thing for me to do, I stuck with it, and it turned out to work pretty well. And at the same time, I had my creative sphere in some other spaces, and dancing, and still making a bit of art on the side, and then venturing into yoga, especially as I successfully navigated myself into a burnout in 2009, during while I was doing a PhD. And from that time on, I was kind of doing these two things at the same time, like left leg in one world, right leg in the other world, or the other way around, who knows. And for the longest time, I saw a lot of my computer science, well, peers, instructors, students fairly stressed out. And I had this other side to balance it out. And eventually I thought, maybe my job is not to straddle them both. Maybe my job is to bring them both together. And so for the last couple of years, I've been doing research on breathwork and what the benefits of it could be for people who may be less inclined to try it unless they hear it as an invitation from one of their own. So I am still a professor at a research university in Sweden, and I like it a lot. It's a great workplace. It's a great crew to be with. I love doing research. I love self-experiments. I try all the things out, and I eat my own medicine.
Well, we're going to get to that. I mean, this is fascinating already. And I think you're the only person I've ever met. So for the audience sake, so if you're a regular, you're going to be like, wait a second. Wait, you've also done computer science, a very eclectic educational background. Only caveat for any of Birgit's audience that's tuning in for this episode, the techies, so to speak, I only did C+. And I did it way back when. Did I hear you correctly? Did you actually say I enjoyed it or something along the lines of I was good at it? Or it's fascinating that you gravitated towards what I would consider one of the more technical industries, CS, computer science, CSE. So take us through like this mindset shift to start, because I'm fascinated by when we've talked, you and I, offline, off camera, so to speak, we've talked about left and right hemisphere. Can you walk me through, because you're already speaking my lingo, this notion of uniting soul and business, so to speak, what I call it, that, bringing the two worlds together. What was your, before and after, so to speak, as far as your mindset? How did this technical training form you, mold you? Because I know my technical legal training formed me and made me a certain way that I had to unlearn. Can you start to speak on that as far as this notion of transformation and how maybe your training actually was a disadvantage, so to speak?
Yes. So within computer science, there is a line of thinking that is called computational thinking. And the main concept of computational thinking is divide and conquer. So you decompose a problem into subproblems, you solve the subproblems, and then you stick the solutions back together and integrate it into the overall solution. Now, what research has pointed out, research personified in a colleague of mine, his name is Steve Easterbrook, he's a professor at Toronto University, he wrote a really great article about how systems thinking and computational thinking oppose each other. So systems thinking is the idea of everything is a system, whether we look at an organization or the human body or any level of abstraction. Everything has some elements, everything has some flow between the elements, information. And when we use only the divide and conquer principle, then we forget about all these in-between dynamics and the side effects. And that's what systems thinking is really good at. Now, systems thinking shows you the whole complexity of a situation that you're looking at, and therefore is not easy to go to a solution. The solution-oriented path is the decomposition. And we often get to suboptimal solutions. So then systems thinking is the way to balance that out and check whether that thing that we're proposing over here is going to have any gnarly side effects that we didn't foresee. So over the course of these computer science years, we've been trying to bring more systems thinking back into the game so it doesn't become that imbalanced. because otherwise we're trying to structure all of our challenges into logical bits and pieces, and then we end up with a very technocratic and solution oriented world that can sometimes really, really bite us in the butt.
How did that show up in your life? Because as I talk about, it's what's inside is outside. How would you say this? Because it sounds like systems thinking is more holistic from my verbiage.
Yes.
And then computational thinking from what you're talking about, which in the legal landscape, we call it IRAC. And I was talking to Manya about this, who you've met and co-creator of mine. So it's fascinating because I was talking about how IRAC, which is issue, rule, analysis, conclusion, is a way that law students are taught to break down in a very linear sequence. So it sounds like it's similar to that, only what I understand from I'm talking more about energy, as you know, so it's more of a divisive versus, what we're talking or contrasting with systems thinking. How did that show up in terms of your leadership yourself, in terms of being divided?
If I take that on a very personal level and look at it at the time of my burnout, I was very good at fragmenting my life and myself. So I was very successful in publishing papers for research. I was very successful in training for marathons. I was strictly vegan at the time. I was partying because you can work hard and you can party hard. And I was taking good care of my friendships. I was staying in touch with my family, like all the things. And I fragmented myself and didn't think of the side effects that one would have on the other, and didn't recharge and restore enough. So that was what the fragmentation was for me. So I had optimal solutions for all the individual things. And I also used the relaxation practices and some yoga practice. That doesn't mean that it adds up to a good whole if you don't check it back with systems thinking. And having these tiny boxes instead of an integrated whole made it feel somewhat frazzled often.
Yeah, I mean, I can see already it's the disharmony of what you're describing, right? Because as I guess quantum mechanics, more or less, if we strip it of the spirituality and mystic sciences, as I call them, you're looking at it as if we don't take systems thinking and we only look at it as computerized, compartmentalize, code, which is what, most code is, right? You're building code to do specific tasks. So I have some, all right, guys, the tech people are like, okay, he knows something. He's not too big of a noob or a rube, depending on who you ask. So I see that. What shifted for you? And I know you're an outlier. I would say you're more of an outlier because it seems like it was already more ingrained in you to have some right hemisphere orientation. Because like myself, I had some of that. I became too left hemisphere dominated, or more this computational thinking only lawyer version, so to speak. So becoming a technocrat, let's call it that for lack of a better description right now. So what may be more difficult for others to shift in this mindset? I would say, as a disclaimer to those listening, for Birgit, it's more natural, I would say, this proclivity to have a right hemisphere orientation. So for the audience's sake, from your recollection, what was your first awakening experience or shift into more of these, what we'll call alternative practices that you're now researching? That, the breathing, what was first for you in terms of like, oh shit, I got to do something about this, I'm fragmented?
I would say there were several levels to it. So first shift was during that burnout phase, realizing in my deep yoga practice that there was something way bigger accessible to me. At the same time, a shift in research, because I was going to just put that PhD on the shelf and walk the other direction and work for an environmental NGO. That sometimes I explain it with I'm a stubborn German. Sometimes I explain it with I wanted to make use of what I had invested 10 years of education into. So I took that education and reframed my research and started researching sustainability and how we could make use of software systems to make human lifestyle more sustainable. And
wait, go back real quick, unpack that one more time, because I've run into this. I looked at your profile when we connected also on LinkedIn, because that's important. I was impressed by this. So what was that again, real quick, for the audience, because you glossed over it quickly?
Okay.
Yeah.
So from being a pure software engineering researcher, I started looking at the impact that software systems have on the human lifestyle in different dimensions of sustainability, environmental, social, individual. And then because we're still working with established companies and an established economy, also on an economic and a technical level, because that's where they need to be implemented if we want to look at higher environmental and social goals.
We're going to come back to it. So back to your flow. So keep going, because I'm going to bring this topic back on the table, because it's beautiful what that's all about. Please continue.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
So that was the next decade of my research. And dang, I'm dating myself now. And
we're only a year apart. It's okay. We're getting better with age, everybody. Like fine wine.
I own it. It was a good year. And I moved to California for doing some more research in environmental sustainability. And from there on, I did bring a lot of enthusiasm to that field, and a lot of researchers started joining that area, and we built it larger. And in 2019, I did go very, very deep in a breathwork session, and decided right then and there to become an instructor in that specific technique. And that is something that I've been.
Is that Michael's system?
Facilitating, yes.
Can we give him a shout out? Is that okay?
Yes.
So tell us the system, because we ended up, that's another synchronicity between us. So yeah, please.
Yes. So I trained with Michael Brian Baker at the Breath Center.
What up, Michael?
So,
and he is, ladies and gentlemen, a shaman, not a showman. His little catchphrase that when I first met him, I love you, man. You're amazing. I fanboyed.
Flip the saying around again.
Did I? Okay, my bad. There's my non-linear brain. Sorry, guys.
That's all right. So yes, I met him at Shakti Fest 2019 here in Joshua Tree. And from there on, trained with him. And then,
what was that like? Pause real quick. Like, break this down, this portion, for, again, there's going to be wide members of the audience. Some of the regulars are advanced, some are newer on the leadership journey, and especially on these alternative or really indigenous ancient traditions, more Eastern traditions that are now scientifically being, validated and researched by, yourself, which we'll get to. What is it like? Break us down the human experience, whether it be somatic, somatosensory. When you're saying I was in a breathwork session, Hans, I went deep. You and I know, especially having done Michael's work, what that means. How would you, as best as you can, this proverbial paint by numbers, so to speak. Mm-hmm. What was the flavor of it, the essence of it, as best as you can describe for somebody who's never done this?
Okay. So first of all, this breathing technique very deeply relaxes your nervous system. Science has proven that this is the quickest way to completely reset your nervous system. So that's a physiological component that is very healing to the body. And then on top of that, it raises your energy in the body. Like, you may have talked about it in the show in various ways before, raising Kundalini energy, or just, we can speak about life force energy in general. We don't have to give it the name of a particular lineage. It's life force energy. And that can bring you into a heightened state of awareness, and it certainly did to me at the time. And I had a lot of visuals. I have clairvoyance developed as my stronger clair, and so I get a lot of visual information. And more than that, in that session, I melted into the ground and I became a giant piece of selenite. I can't put that into any other word.
That's awesome.
I know how outlandish and woo-woo it sounds, and I own it.
You had an out of body. Let's unpack that, because on the second episode of this, second season, if you're new, go back on the YouTube channel. This season, they're in sequential order for your convenience. There have been a consecutive series of these episodes. To William talks about plant medicine, because it seems to me what you're describing is what I would call an endogenous activation versus a plant-based activation, which is taking an external substance. Because we produce, as you know, being sophisticated, and thank you for saying what you said, you can strip away the lineages, the verbiage, and go down to its very core essence. These are inner energetic systems, science is validating, etc. So, which we're going to get to in research and all this beautiful stuff you're also doing. So this is awesome. Did at any point in time back then, because now you've accepted it, and thank you again for being here and being raw. It's worked out beautifully, you being in Southern California, which isn't a hard place to not be, as you know very well. So I've joked with you like the Godfather, they keep pulling me back, Mm-hmm. What was it at any moment in time, you going then, not now, then going, holy fuck balls, this is nuts. Holy shit, what's happening right now? What was like your human experience? So like, how did you deal with that dissonance in that moment or after it? Like, how did you integrate it, so to speak, or didn't integrate it for the audience, because again, it can be bewildering. And you and I know, and some of the audience some people are now dipping their toes into these very powerful, very potent performance, whether it be for performance or burnout, healing, restorative. There's various reasons, different facets. How did you deal with that dissonance that I oftentimes find with clients, and on the show we've talked about it in other ways? How did that, I was selenite, holy, how did you integrate that then?
I very literally sat with it. So I already had a pretty solid meditation practice, and therefore I know that the best way of integrating is to sit with those things and then see what else comes through. And it also, while it was certainly a bewildering experience, it also felt strangely familiar and absolutely safe. So it was more like a puzzle piece that I hadn't remembered fell back into place. And that familiarity that I had around it made me sign up for the instructor training right away. And I have always moved forward from that point. So that one is a very, very present point whenever I talk about what I am today and how I show up in the world and how I serve the world.
What was next, if you were to go chronologically or big picture, in terms of other tools in your toolbox that were part of your awakening journey, so to speak?
Well, I'd have to reel it back to the yoga and like the yoga teacher training, which happened 5 years earlier. So after moving to California in 2015, I did my yoga teacher training. So before I was practicing myself, and then I had been wanting to take that to the next level for a while. And I trained with Dharma Shakti at Yogalution Movement in Long Beach. And I loved her training. I still admire her as a teacher. And we're still very well connected. I just took her class yesterday. It was beautiful. And
you did move to the right part of the world for having what I would call an awakening, so to speak. Because you're coming to what I've come to learn, having not known, it was in my backyard growing up, the mecca of a lot of these progressive, cutting edge movements, so to speak, that are now science-based. So, okay, you did the yoga. So then you're going through all of this and infusing it. So keep going. Yeah, I like this.
Yes. And after I did the yoga teacher training, I was a faculty computer science professor at Long Beach State. And I started doing little yoga interventions in class. So in between the 2 lecture hours, we would have like a bathroom break and everybody gets some water and stretch for a minute. And then I'd say, if you wish, I'm going to do 2 minutes of yoga. You're welcome to join. You don't have to.
Oh, yeah.
And so we started getting that going, and students really enjoyed it, and they were very willing to pick that up. And so I had taken that along. And when I started at Chalmers in Sweden, I started teaching yoga classes to my colleagues, because the day that I started there, our lovely administrative personnel, her name is Anne, she said, so I saw on your CV that you're also a certified yoga teacher. Do you want to teach us some yoga here? That would be great.
No way.
Sure. Okay. So I was teaching yoga twice a week at the department until everything locked down and everybody went into home office. And then I sat there for a while, and I realized, okay, everybody's stuck at home. People are getting stressed out. People are having mental challenges. How could I support that? Well, obviously, breathwork is one great route of doing that. And I used to facilitate it in person, and then started doing it over Zoom, which worked. And then I thought, what if I managed to get some data on this, some empirical data, to help show that this doesn't have to be out in woo-woo land. This is something that is very measurable, what the benefits for people are. And I'm going to reduce the verbiage that may make some people go run for the hills and not open to an experience, and explain to them, here are the neurophysiological effects of doing these breathing exercises, and then leave whatever else could come through open. And I'm in the 3rd run of this research study. I've completed 2 of them and analyzed the data and just sent out the first publication. And it has shown to increase people's relaxation, increase people's mood. They feel more cheerful and relaxed in general. I've had a lot of participants where it reduced depression and anxiety. and overall generally higher well-being, and a lot of really, really fun reflective journal entries. One of the favorite quotes I had in the second run of the study was, "It took a while to get here, and adulting has finally paid off."
Ooh, I
I
like
love
that.
that one. So what I did with them was we did 12 weeks of one breathwork session a week. On Mondays, I would send everybody a primer email saying, "Hey, this is the topic for the week. Here's a couple of reflection questions, and I'll see you online on Thursday." And then we would do the breathing session. And then there's often an integration phase after. So after we go really deep in these practices, whether it be breath work or whether it be deep meditation sessions or some guided journeys, then there was a couple of grounding techniques like getting ourselves in salt water, sitting on the bare ground, taking some time to journal, like all these things I would give them on the way. And so they could
Wow.
integrate a little bit deeper whatever came through. And I would ask for them to take a couple of notes for us as well. So we knew what they were reflecting on. And we had some surveys to collect quantitative data as well. One of the funny things was when we could not make sense of the quantitative data, we had the qualitative data to go back to
Hmm.
understand what we couldn't make sense of. And one example for that is
Hmm.
one of the instruments that we used. An instrument is the fancy word for here's a standardized survey that has been validated.
Hmm.
So it's a valid, and that's what's being called an instrument. So
Hmm.
one of the things that we used is the mindful attention awareness scale. And that one asks you questions like, or no, it gives you statements and you get to rate them on a Likert scale. Likert scale is something that breaks down from I disagree completely to I agree completely.
Hmm.
So you rate yourself on these statements, and the statements are something like, I forget a person's name immediately after they introduce themselves, or sometimes I drive places and I don't even remember how I got there. And we did the survey using that instrument and a number of others at the beginning and at the end of that 12-week study. And specifically for the mindful attention awareness, we didn't see that much improvement in the ratings. And we were confused
Hmm.
by that until we looked into the qualitative data, and all the reflections showed us that, oh, yeah, the mindful attention awareness had increased a lot. Now, when you get to
Hmm.
rate yourself on it, now that your attention has increased and your awareness around it, you're also going to know all the times you zoned out, and you're going to be way more aware of all the times when you were not
Hmm.
present in the moment. Whereas before you didn't know what you didn't know. So
Hmm.
that's why in the research that I do, I've realized that the quantitative data by itself could be not understandable or counterintuitive. And if we have the free text answers that go along with it that help us interpret the data, then we can come to way more meaningful results.
Hmm. Well, it takes us back to systems thinking, because that makes sense too when you look at it. I mean, through my prism of what I'm used to doing in alchemy, so to speak, or inner transformative work, is yeah, you're describing it as you expand the consciousness, then you subsume more awareness, and then you have that presence, and then your blind spots become clear, so to speak. As you said, you become more aware of when you're not present, so to speak. And yeah, that's okay. So still, this is like for me a geek out, because as I've told you, one of my early teachers was a researcher as well, and it it's important work because of the reason you've already stated, because it brings more validation to the multidimensional benefits at so many levels that you're talking about, where you don't again have to use it for the spiritual benefits or facets. You can use it, as you're articulating very clearly, to things that now everybody's talking about and are all the craze: EQ, mindfulness, self awareness, performance, flow psychology, to name a few as you're nodding your head. So, where do you see currently, and I know it's ever evolving and we've geeked out about this offline, so to speak, where do you currently see this research going, and in a bigger scheme, broadening the systems to whether however you want to answer this, your industry and the applications to your industry, as well as to the world as a whole? Where do you see your research going with this?
Okay. Three directions to start
Yeah,
with. I
talk to
think
us,
I could go
Goose. Yeah.
on that forever.
Well, we
Um,
may stay
on
tuned
on
right
the
now.
very on the very geek out level of me being a researcher who's super curious about finding little knowledge nuggets that we didn't know about before. When we speak about energy and life force, And for everybody who thinks this is in woo-woo land, I love to do just a simple hand exercise of just hold your hands at a short distance and then notice what you feel. And I like that is not the body heat that is radiating from the other hand. And most people have agreed with me in the past that they do feel something. So there's the energy. And what we used to refer as aura, and some people could see it, and most other people would say woo land. This is now the biofield science. So there's a lot of researchers call this biofield. And in Claremont, where you live at the university, there is actually a physics professor who has done a lot of research in this area. And to me, it's fascinating that we can show this now. And I would love to have a larger research study where I can measure how people's field changes, how their energetic field changes over time as they become more acquainted with this practice. And then one thing that I did a little feasibility test on last December, and I say feasibility test in quotation marks because I was the only guinea pig, and obviously a single data point doesn't tell us much, but I put on one of these brain hats, and we did an EEG measurement. And I do not have the exact results of the data analysis because the lovely postdoc that helped me measure it went to maternity leave. And from the measurement session itself, I remember her saying, oh, there is definitely an increased activation or increased activity in the alpha band waves here, which is what we see in long-term meditators. So the hypothesis, and I would love to do the actual study to show whether that's true, is that breathwork can get you into the same deep meditative states that long-term meditators get themselves into in a shorter period of time and with less effort. And the question of this could all be done with less effort, we've talked about earlier as well, and breathwork may be one of the tools that helps us do that. So that is geeky answer number one. So I would love to do some biofield measurements and some EEG measurements and some other metrics that just require a bit more expensive equipment. Then the second level is I want to get this out into industry. And so I've been very careful around my wording of how I present this, for example, to IT companies. Of course, they will always ask about performance and productivity. And it would be really bad if this thing got a reputation for, oh, I got to sit down and do my prescribed meditation or breath work or whichever tool it is, so that they can then squeeze a little bit more performance out of me. No. So instead, we look at, well, if I have more resilience against whatever happens, and if I recover more quickly, and we're showing both of that with the studies up so far, then we're going to have increased employee retention. We're going to have less turnover. We're going to have less sick days. So that is good. And by the way, as a side effect, you also get more productivity because people train their focus. And especially software engineering, the discipline that I specifically come from, is a task that requires a lot of very focused attention. And we only have so much attention capacity per day. So the better we can focus, the more effective we can be in that area. That was number two, getting that as training into companies, and then having the cultural change along with that, of not the HR department sending you an email. And by the way, we care about your personal health and about your mental well-being, while all the other emails are associated with deadlines and everything's urgent. So there needs to be a cultural shift happening along with introducing these tools and practices. And then number three, and this is maybe the most important one, ties into a shift that is already happening, which is the next generation coming up. Let's teach them, let's integrate that into our general education. And that is something that we can change at the university level, and hopefully way sooner already. So there are some schools that already teach meditation on elementary school level. Of course, meditation looks different, and maybe it takes 2 minutes instead of 15. And maybe there are some other introspective practices and some other relaxation practices. It needs to be age adequate. So I would love to make this accessible to different audiences, whether that's my computer science student, or whether that's some kids that are just going to kindergarten right now, or whether that's an IT professional in their 50s that is realizing there could be more energy flow accessible to me, and I'm not sure how to do it here's a couple of ways of how you could tap into that.
So you again perfectly fitting into what I believe is kind of the objective nature of energy, the energetics, excuse me, the energetic engineering. You know, that there are literally pathways, there is a energetic sciences biofield, and I didn't know, as we talked about offline, about this local researcher. I mentioned one of my teachers was in San Diego before, and so I know it was in my proverbial backyard. So it's fascinating because you brought up something that we find in mediation, being one of my full-time gigs before, so to speak, is mandating it. Because by definition, you know, mindfulness is voluntary and is relaxing and is meant to be, you know, opening and expanding, which is why you see the lotus as a symbol oftentimes. So yeah, then mandating it and shoving it into a box. So I love that because you touched on a very oftentimes very ripe leadership term, culture. And I like how you talk about, again, very back to systems thinking, very holistic, very integrative of you to say, oh, we need to also shift the culture. And so taking this and applying it, and I like that as well because the broad appealability, because you don't have to, again, use it only for spiritual facets. And I think that's where even the ancient mystics and yogis were saying that. You know, one of my favorites, Yogananda, would oftentimes say, be able to take the meditative state into the concrete jungle, into civilization, into that. And so it doesn't matter whether you're using it for, you know, performance, awareness, you know, calm, healing, etc. That's really awesome. Real quick, it's relatively fresh. Take us back to this notion, which again, I'm seeing this theme of systems thinking and really how it has a societal impact. So software and the impact, and I'm over paraphrasing you here from the notes, software and the impact it has on lifestyle and different ecosystems.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to me about that, because
Okay.
your industry may know that. I understand it conceptually. Break it down for us, because I know that's also something that's spreading like wildfire in various industries. And I think it's part of this new earth paradigm, this awakening of this collective consciousness, that it's going to involve various industries. And it seems like that's something you're thought leading and leading the way on in your industry. I'm not saying you only, that I like that you're also talking about this. So break that down. What do you mean? Well, that was one of your research or thesis aspects or something, right? So walk us
Absolutely.
through that if you can.
Mm-hmm. The simple premise is that software tends to run the world these days. And if you
It's
question
important.
that, think about what pieces of software you use throughout the day and what types of tasks you do with it or without it. And of course, there are home chores and things like that that we do, and working out that may work without software. And for a lot of the time, especially in our work, we do interact with quite a bit of software.
Hmm.
And that means from communication to any administrative work to the way how we share information right now, all of it is supported by technology. And technology by itself is neutral. And Professor Lawrence Hilty from the University of Zurich, he used to use a knife as an example. He said, you know, is a knife sustainable? I don't know. It depends what you use it for.
Hmm.
So he said you can use a knife to chop vegetables, you can use a knife to perform open heart surgery, or you can use a knife to hurt somebody. So all these things. And so the sustainability impact of the technology depends on how exactly you use it. And what I've been working on over the past 10 years is this impact awareness framework, where we look at sustainability in these 5 dimensions that I mentioned earlier: individual, social, environmental, technical, and economic,
Hmm.
and say, okay, the software system itself, what are the direct effects of it? And it's usually the life cycle analysis components of it. What are the resources that go into fabricating this? And then
Hmm.
at the end of the life cycle, like how much energy does it use over the course of its usage, and how do I discard it? Then there's the second order effects. And here it becomes more interesting, because the second order effects are the indirect effects, as in, what does it enable the user to do? Let's use a car sharing system as an example. So
Hmm.
the first order impact would be the energy that the server uses to run. If we strip it down really simply. Second order effects is, you and I can now book car sharing rides. We can therefore make less use of our own car. Maybe we don't even need one anymore. It enables us to have mobility as a service. And then third order effects would be systemic long-term effects. And those systemic long-term effects would then be, well, if a lot of people use the system over a long period of time, that means a lot of us can sell our personal cars if we can rely on the shared resource. And most of the air pollution in cities comes from cars circling looking for inner city parking. So that goes away because now we have less cars on the road. We don't have the parking problems anymore, and so on and so forth. Less cars being bought and having to be discarded of later. So there we have some good third order effects. The tricky thing is that can also rebound because, you know, if we look at all of our little Tamagotchis, does anybody remember Tamagotchis? You know, our digital devices, like we used to have maybe one computer in a household 20 years ago, if at all. And now most of us own several devices, and you probably have a drawer of technology devices that were somebody that you used to know. And that's what's called a rebound effect. So this actually goes back to one of my favorite references, 1867. It's pretty cool for a computer scientist to be able to quote something from 1867. That was the Jevons paradox. And the Jevons paradox was in Britain when we learned how to burn coal more efficiently. So the hypothesis was, oh, now that we learn how to burn coal more efficiently, we're obviously going to use less of it, right? What happened instead was that there was an inflation of the price and people were like, now we can use more energy, great. And so that is called a rebound effect, that people use more energy than before. And the same has happened with technology becoming so efficient and so, in everything, that now we have several devices and we discard of them more quickly and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of that impact work of technology.
I mean, I would have, I guess, because I have a relatively analytical mindset, so to speak, I would have considered some of that multidimensionality that you presented. I think you took it a step further than even I would have considered. And that's wow, because I mean, now I go, whoa, what an interesting frame of the context. Because what are the various aspects, very holistic. And then interesting, because I had that taught to me energetically, this rebound effect theory in a different context, not this particular theory per se, after Vipassana, where I called my sibling's friend, who's a Vedic, more Indian traditional yogi breathwork practitioner. And I was all jacked up and amped up, and he said, oh, you have energy rebound, and we see it in other dynamics, because I think it's cyclical in nature, the nature of waves, so to speak, and everything's energy, as Tesla said, energy, think waves, frequency, vibration. So that's really interesting that you're saying that. How, I mean, I can already tell you, we've had banking on here, we've had insurance, we've had, law, various industries, all around executive space, etc. I can already imagine, what you're proposing. So how readily received is this in the industry, or is this something that is considered? Because I would tie into something I normally would ask the guest: where do you see your role and where your vision is of where your industry is headed? So let's start with this, because these are awesome things I think the world is headed in realizing. All of these various second and third tertiary impacts, and then considering the social, psychological, with the rebound effect, so to speak. So how readily accepted is this? And then how does that tie into what you see your role as a leader in your industry, so to speak, because that is one of your passion points?
So the sustainability awareness framework that we have put this all together in is a freely available tool. We have tried this out and evaluated it in 7 different application domains. So
wow.
From accounting software to running a racetrack to an online canvas software to a couple of other things, a remote watering system in India. And so different application domains, and it has shown useful to every single one of them. Also, big flight scheduling system that is being used globally. And it is freely available on Zenodo. You can download it. We can put the link in the show notes. And for the longest time, we felt like we were running after companies to have them try it out and do some empirical evaluations with them. And not too long ago, a big IT company in Germany sent us an email and said, hey, we came across this thing of yours and we've been applying it and we have a couple of questions. And that's the point where we're like, yes, people are finding it and people are
Tipping
starting
point.
to apply it by themselves. So
Yeah.
we hope that from there it continues to be used further and further. I am giving regular talks on it so we can increase people and companies knowing about it, and then it's up to them if they want to apply it. It is used early in the development of a system or in the evolution of a system, and it takes a couple of hours to do an analysis of it. And we have the complete workbook that guides people through the workshop and how to moderate it online, available for free.
We will
Ta-da,
be
that's
putting
research
it.
for you. Hmm?
We're going to be putting it. So yeah, please do, because that's
Yes.
one of the criterion for those that haven't followed the show before. It's really one of the
Mhm.
criterion, in a sense, is that how I define this, leader, ascended leader who's, demonstrating is. I love that, because that seems to be more and more the emerging one of your emerging passions, is this notion of applying this in a very practical, impactful way, systems based. So yeah, we'll drop it in this link of this, what was now part one of part two will be up TBD. So wow. What's that?
If I may add one more point to that.
Yeah,
So
definitely keep it going. We're only getting part of that, I know.
the first part is the sustainability awareness framework, and then the other part is the breathwork interventions and the studies that I've been doing around this. So that data is also readily available for people to show, hey, here is something that is fairly easy to integrate. One of the reasons why I specifically wanted to do research around breathwork as opposed to some of the other practices that can help us come home to ourselves, as I like to call it, because that's really the sense that I get when I practice. Um, some people may be too anxious to meditate. Some people may physically not be able to do any yoga asana practice. Everybody needs to breathe, and everybody can modify their breathing pattern to that bit that is required for this technique. And so it is very accessible and it can create big shifts. And so having that as something that is easy to bring as well, a building a resilience tool to a company, as a leadership tool as well, because you mentioned earlier, it's all about the culture in an organization. It's not going to work if if somebody sends out the emails of you should do this for your health. If I have a CEO walking in the company who is fairly even keeled and mostly relaxed and in a good mood, and then people are like, how do they do that? And I want to learn how to make that happen for myself. So if our leaders walk the talk, then it's going to trickle down to everybody else.
Definitely. Again, speaking my lingo, can we use the B word?
Yeah.
Bliss. Can you tell us what's the role of bliss as you have uncovered it? Because I know, as I met you on the app that we both quote unquote teach on, that you call it bliss breath work. And so what you're describing to me echoes the resonance of bliss, what some could call bliss. Mystic traditions, they called it samadhi. We talked about it in other episodes, specifically William and I on what we call episode 2 of this second season, talk about all, heightened states, these enlightened states, so to speak. What does bliss mean to you? And yes, our leaders, if they embodied that joy or exuberance, however you choose to define it in your words. I know you use bliss. What's the role of bliss, and what does bliss mean to you? And how did that take part in let's start with how didn't you have bliss? I've heard some of it we've all heard it on today's episode. So for you, did you ever block bliss? And if so, how? Because I know I blocked bliss.
There's so many ways how to block bliss.
All right.
Gotta get this done on time, got this deadline to meet, gotta. Oh yeah, the need and the have to and the should. Those are my favorite ways to block bliss. And I think that there are many of us who are very skilled in this.
Good. I agree.
Every time I'm shoulding myself.
I should all over the place. I tend not to do it as much as possible.
Yes. So those are some very good ways of blocking bliss. And bliss to me means feeling in full alignment, like feeling energized, feeling very connected with the world around me. And that includes other human beings and goes way beyond human beings. So it's more inclusive than that. It is an energy that I feel running from the ground through me up, and in all directions. It is the biofield. If I feel connected to the biofield, then I am in bliss. And the biofield is something that surrounds everything. It is within us, it connects us. And you could say we humans are just really good at ignoring the fact that we're part of a larger organism. And as long as we keep seeing each other separate from each other, that's going to be difficult to shift. And the more we sense these connections and the more we understand how much we are part of a larger organism, we just happen to have our own monkeys jumping around our heads, which is why we think we're separate. The better we can get over that core wounding, the better things will come into alignment and into flow, and with that into bliss.
I love that. And you're hitting a lot of the high notes of core wounding and so many of the themes we cover that impact the leadership journey. Sounds to me like what you're describing, because if we put it in energy engineering terminology, bliss is a state of being or frequency or feeling when you are in connection or in coherence with your biofield. And it sounds to me like what you're describing, Doc, is automatic. In other words, we get in the way of the automatic bliss because the biofield seems to me like it does its thing and it's us that disrupt it. Right? Like Albert Camus, the author, says, life is simple, it's humans that make it complex. So we oftentimes get in our own way and block our bliss. So yeah, I'm jiving with you, Doc. I'm jiving. I like this. Or as I call you, B Money, because you're bringing the money. You're making it rain because it's validated. And that's why I love it straight from the horse's mouth. I can say this stuff till my face turns red, blue, and yellow in the colors of the spectrum of the hues available on the bandwidth. Roy G. Biv, everybody, is all behind me. Roy G. Biv. I think Roy's there and G. Biv is over there. So keep going. So now you're talking, you unpacked for us barriers, let's call them blocks to bliss, how we bliss block ourselves. I'm such a bliss blocking mofo. So now I'm blissed out all the time because it's a state of being. What's the role in leadership? And you touched upon it in other ways, and I know we're giving it a new name, a new flavor. Why would a leader, because I'm going to play devil's advocate. Why bliss, you weirdo?
If I am freaking turned on by life, who would not want to run with my mission?
Okay, keep going. You got my attention, you woo-woo supposed PhD, you. Okay.
So the being freaking turned on by life is a term that one of my beloved friends and colleagues in Sweden uses, Hannah Sophia Borg. And she says that it's pretty much her definition of bliss. Like, I feel turned on by life. I'm tapped in and turned on. And that means if I am in integrity with my values, and if I am accessing energy in a sustainable way, in a good way, then I am, first of all, going to be very charismatic. I'm going to be inspiring. I'm going to be walking my own talk. And that is what has people want to contribute to a mission. So if people resonate with my mission and I am all in and I am walking my talk, then people will come contribute and follow.
This is amazingly true, Doc. Yeah, I mean, you're talking this resonance as we've used, and it's, it started in the spiritual movement to be colloquialized as your vibe. I like your vibe, man. Your vibe is so awesome, Haas. And so I think that truly there is now, right, heart math, as you and I know, and many others, and now you're bringing your beautiful research in various ways and eclectically, showing that, oh, wow, this stuff is very much true, because as you're illustrating, it magnetizes you. It's that glow, it's that effervescence, it's that magnetization, it's that igniting of the light.
Yes.
I like that. So now give us a flavor of like when you go full woo-woo on those corporations. So like, what is Bliss Breathwork, which is what I know you for, which some of your tech people may know about because they attend the Insight Timer classes, some may not. And I know you do them outside of Insight as well. So that's one interface that we met. So what does that mean? What is Bliss Breathwork? Can you give us a flavor of how you do it? We know how Michael does it. You talked us through a little bit of that. What's your flavor? Because earlier at the very beginning, you talked about your medicine. You've eaten your medicine. So I know in our healer land, we talk about what's your medicine? How does it taste, so to speak?
So Bliss breathwork is not a specific term for something that is any different from what I learned from Michael. I very much follow the lineage that Michael has taught me. The only reason why it's called that is because I started with the Bliss Whisper meditations on Insight Timer. And to make it easier for people to find my events, I just kept that same word in there. Like that's all that the bliss part is. And to me, bliss has this feeling of open, freeing, igniting. And I
like
like
that.
that it carries that resonance.
What was the Bliss Whisper meditation? Because I didn't know that about you. So how did that germinate, that seed drop in or download of bliss for the meditation? What was that? Because I liked how you described that. That was dope. This notion of it's this expansive state starting from the heart center, really like radiating, emanating out, to use my spin on what I felt your vibe was, man. So talk to us about like what dropped in then. So that's Michael's. I get that as far as the IP. Then what was I'm more interested in the essence of what dropped in for you to even coin the word bliss for yourself or associate with it in that regard, if you catch my drift.
Coming from the meditation practice. So I've trained traditional Vipassana and then mindfulness meditation. One of my teachers who has been very central to that aspect is Karina Nickerson in Long Beach. And with her, it was very much about being in the moment and being accepting and feeling of whatever is coming through and being with that. So very traditional Buddhist lineage, wonderful. And then I had also been following David Lyon for a while, who speaks very much about getting into the higher states of being and allowing bliss to come through, allowing real life magic coming through. His favorite term is magic for this. And opening ourselves to these states instead of staying in lower frequencies. And so in the Bliss Whisper meditations, what I aim for is connecting both of these. So can we be fully accepting with whatever we are feeling in the moment? And can we then also allow to open ourselves wider? Because most emotions, as they wash through us, unless we follow the monkey mind stories that then try to hook in, they will carry through in about 90 seconds to 3 minutes through our physical body. And so if we stick with our attention on the physical sensations in the body, then that big wave of sadness that I just had, I may have been bawling my eyes out, and that wave of sadness will have naturally passed unless I keep ruminating about that breakup that I went through. Because then, of course, it can carry on for hours and hours. So if I let that sadness wash through me fully and I allow myself to fully feel it instead of trying to hide from it, then it will naturally pass on. There may be way more waves later. That's okay. And then I can open that space in between, that in that stillness, I can receive the higher frequencies that can come in. I can welcome them and I can align with them. And once you've tapped into them for the first time, I've realized once you learn a new frequency, it's really a learning process. Then it's way easier to find your way back to it. So most meditations at the end, I say, okay, feel into your body what you're feeling right now. And if this is a good feeling, if you went to a state of being that you would rather spend more time in, remember this frequency, create the memory of it, because it will be easier to get back there. I'm not telling you anything new. You can do this by yourself. And remember to sit down and do it. And that's where the term Bliss Whisper meditation comes from. And then I transferred that to the breathwork as well, because it can get you to that very same beautiful state.
You're like beautifully eloquating and synthesizing various themes that have come up this season, some excerpts from last season, in terms of the various aspects of how this not only applies to leadership or personal growth, and it's about the allowing. I like that, how you've worded that. It's allowing and opening to life's magic to come through, which is an energy, a life force, if you strip it of any labels, so to speak. It's the isness, right? It's that isness, that state of beingness that is presenced, so to speak. And I call it like frequency jumping and quantum verbiage. It's like playing hopscotch with frequencies. And it does. It takes, as you and I know very well, it takes inner landscaping, so to speak, to get there. And we talked about it originally in this episode in terms of this computational thinking and shifting the mindset and considering the system as a whole. And then you've brought out this software impact on and the subtleties of that, which obviously in our day and age, sustainability is a huge concern. So I love this. I love this.
Thank you.
How are you feeling in terms of where you see the optimism of the industry embracing these norms, or these as norms, so to speak, to kind of round out that topic of software, the applications of this novel and very impactful research?
So with technology, we have a really powerful tool, and therefore it comes back again to what's the intention as we use it. And when we look into who's producing the software, it's a very specific part of the population. So one of the biggest developments that I see for the IT industry is to become more diverse and more inclusive in terms of understanding the user communities and coming out of our own narrow vision of what we think users may need, and being very conscious that we are embedding the values that we have into any system we build. Like, this goes back to organizational research from the 70s, that we carry our values into the systems that we build. And therefore, everybody working in IT has a pretty big responsibility. And I've had a lot of conversations where some people would say, I'm just following what is written in my contract. It doesn't resolve you of the responsibility. So it is okay to say, I disagree what is written there, and I'm still doing it for the paycheck, and make that a conscious choice or choose differently. So whatever choice people make is their choice, and it cannot be oh, it's not my responsibility. There is always a shared responsibility for all the things that we do, and all of our actions have choices. And when the IT industry can take on that responsibility for the systems that we put out there, then I believe we are less prone to being technology solutionists, as in, oh, tech is going to solve all the challenges that we're currently going through, and instead realizing that the intention that we put into it is going to make the difference.
Yum, yum, num, 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 yummy. Because I love it. I oftentimes say that the energy of the ecosystem is a reflection of the founder, or the founders, the energy of the business ecosystem. It's the extension of the founder. And I like how you say it as we are embedding our values. I added codex in my notes into the systems we build, or the ecosystems. If it's outside of a computer system, which in the instance of a software company, you're building an ecosystem of building systems. That's a mind boggle for those listening. So I like that. It's very much in line with what I know your essence to be, is taking a very holistic approach, having seen the impact it had on your own personal leadership in your own life. So I love this. So anything else that feels inspired to round out what apparently is the first of 2 episodes? And again, why do we do it this way? Inspiration, the way that got us here won't get us out of here, as B's talking about, as Birgit's talking about, as Dr. P, as Doc is talking about, is this notion of this fabric, as I call it, together. One of the catchphrases I use is together we're rising. It's each leader's personal responsibility. I love how you peppered all of that juicy stuff in. Anything else you feel inspired to share at this time to round us out for episode 1?
Yes. So as we come home to ourselves, we get to feel a lot of discomfort. Many of us have been running, have been distracting ourselves, and also society likes to have it this way. So it can become really uncomfortable for a while when we do come home to ourselves. And as I learned from Joseph Campbell, every emotion fully felt is bliss. This includes grief, rage, anger, sadness, all the things that we often rather duck out of. So I want to invite everyone to trust yourself, that you can hold the space for your feelings, to physically feel them in your body and be with that. And when you do that inner cleaning, when we all do that inner cleaning, then we can show up as a wonderful tool in the world, and we can be of service to everybody, because we're no longer projecting our stuff onto other people. Like, we own our stuff, we alchemize our own stuff, and then we go back out in the world. And whenever there is a need for recharge time, being in nature is really good to go through those emotions. It helps me a lot. Like, I am a bare feet on the ground type of person. That may not be everybody's jam. That's okay. Whatever your version of being in nature is great. So first coming home to ourselves so that then we can show up in full service of the world. And don't believe my words. You know, I'm a researcher, so go self-experiment.
You know, you didn't negative reverse them. Uh-oh, that's a psycho.
What?
No. So
Oh,
in sales, we call that a negative reversal. It's like, don't you take my word. And it's true. I like your style and how you couch that, because I oftentimes say it too. Experience it yourself. Go experiment. And in fact, that is the etymology of the word experience, is that it has been experimented. It's a hypothesis or knowledge, theoretical knowledge you experienced or experimented with in your own life laboratory, hence experience or wisdom gained, so to speak. So I love that, Doc, that you round us out with this notion of that ownership as well. Well, if you haven't already been like, wait a second, Breathwork and Bliss, they may have a room for leadership, whether it be in the tech space or greater, let's take it to the systems thinking level, leadership as a whole. As always, I wanted to say thank you for tuning in. As you can tell, we have a collective mission, a shared purpose on many levels, this soul sister and I. And I commend each of you for tuning in, taking the time, and wherever you're at in your leadership journey, that you too can bring together your 9 to 5, so to speak, your business and your soul, your passion, your calling, your things that move you or bring bliss for you. So that way you too can bring forth whatever you're here to bring forth, so we can all continue to rise together. Thank you, B, for being here. Thank you for listening. If this inspired you, feel free to share it. And in that way, you do your part. And we'll see you for what will be later this season, part 2 of this 2-part inspired series, and doing it in that inspired way to show that new way. You don't always have to think with your mind and think left hemisphere. It's possible to use more intuitive, inspired ways. So thank you as always, and we'll see you back here soon. Love and blessings to each of you.